That's just motivational. Let's do this. I'm making a desk.
My old setup was actually kind of embarrassing. It was just an antique sewing machine sitting next to a cheap Walmart desk that really wasn't sturdy enough to support my two 27-inch monitors. They drifted all by themselves. The cable management was atrocious. It was a very uncomfortable workspace, and it was way overdue for an upgrade. I put down some plastic before cleaning and lightly sanding the walls, and then applied a Behr Marquee matte finish in two different colors, Ocean Abyss and a black mocha that went on opposing walls. I'm also going to be reupholstering some acoustic panels that will be incorporated into a backlit LED light panel that I'll be featuring in an upcoming video. For the top of the desk, I used a full sheet of 3/4 inch MDF, and with a measurement, I set up my circular saw to ride a length of aluminum angle, which I held in place just with some creative clamping. Now the desk is going to be L-shaped and made up of these two pieces. The long side of the desk will measure 7 feet, and the short side of the desk will be 4.5 feet long. I'll be joining the two pieces together with pocket screws that are drilled into both pieces in opposing directions. I rubbed in tight bond glue for good measure, and once they were brought together nice and tight, I added two 12-inch braces that I recessed with a router so they mount nice and flush to the underside of the desk. Nice touch. I'm incorporating the hexagonal shape into the corners of the desk as well to help bring everything together. I routed out two channels for speaker cable at the back of the desk and then drilled the hole for the monitor bracket. I also used a 1/8 inch round over bit in the hole as well as on the lower portion of the desk where the tower will live. For the legs of the desk, I am going with a stretched hexagon look out of scrap 2x10 lumber. The leg here is made more for form than function. It will be against the drawer box, which will provide the support for the short side of the desk. Now, for the second leg, I'm going to remove the central portion of the design with a jigsaw and a 45-degree router for a similar but very unique design. To build the drawer box and drawers, I'll be using the table saw to ensure consistency with my cuts. I'm using 3/4 inch MDF for everything except the drawer bottoms, which will be cut from 1/2 inch MDF. And they will also tuck nice and neat into a 1/4 inch dado that I also cut into the wood using the table saw. I'm holding together the drawer sides with more pocket screws and, of course, Titebond 3 wood glue. However, the drawer bottoms are just going to float without glue in the 1/4 inch dado channel created on the table saw. I'm using undermount drawer slides, and when installed, they rest on the face frame of the drawer box. I'll just measure it out. I'll have 2 drawers at 3 inches deep and 1 drawer at 9 inches deep. Drawer faces are beveled, properly spaced, glued, clamped, and then screwed from inside. I then glued and nailed on a 2-inch wide, 3/4 inch thick drop edge to the desktop as well as keyboard tray, which I cut and fit with the table saw and chop box before sanding and prepping the surfaces for paint. With the same colors used on the walls, I painted the drawer box, the drawers, and the components of the legs. While it rained, I installed the brushed nickel drawer pulls, and it's coming together. Because of an excessive amount of screws and glue, the monitor bracket receptacle will support the weight of these monitors for eternity. I also widened the hole for the monitor bracket so I can discreetly hide DisplayPort and power cables for the monitors. Now for the Bondo. Yep, auto body Bondo. I mixed in tinted hardener thoroughly on a scrap piece of MDF, and then I rubbed it and dabbed it with a gloved hand over all of the necessary edges to achieve a faux rock face appearance. Once I had the Bondo dry, I came at it with a variable speed orbital sander, some 60 and 220 grit sandpaper to round over the corners. I brushed and rolled on the primer coat using the same Ocean Abyss paint and primer. I used 6 different spray paints to finish off the undercoat texture layer. But for my epoxy pour, I'll be using 6 different metallic dusts, black and white dye, and those same 6 spray paints. The full color recipe is in the description. I misted all of the surfaces randomly, and this did wonders for the rock face edge of the desk. Then I mixed Stone Coat Countertops epoxy at a 1-to-1 ratio. A ton of air made the epoxy look white before I filled up my individual mixing cups, but here we go anyway. I went with 8 different color combinations of dyes, metallic powders, and spray paints. I mixed everything thoroughly, and to keep my recipe organized, I previously labeled the cups, and now it's game on. I poured diagonal, random, and overlapping puddles over everything, even put some on with a paint stick, and then with a glove hand, I spread and gently blended the lines together before brushing the edges. I mixed alcohol with copper and bronze metallic dust and misted everything before adding a dirty pourer detail, some striations, and then torched out some air bubbles. I broke some surface tension, added more detail with some viscous drizzle, and I'm loving it. Even with some areas of the desk top being a little bit thin, there were a ton of divots everywhere, and with a little bit of heat and a lot of time, I made sure everything started to lay out as smooth as possible. One divot after another, after another, after another, but wow. To think I was planning to intentionally scuff this masterpiece with sandpaper felt wrong. However, knowing it was time for the clear coat was exciting. I took my time troweling out 3 ounces per square foot of additive-free Stone Coat Countertop epoxy with a 1/8 inch square notch trowel, and everything leveled right out. I kept a tape dam in place around everything while I torched out any air bubbles. I did this 3 times, and then about an hour and a half later, I exposed the rock face edge and made sure everything was covered by brushing on some relatively thick epoxy, and then removed the rest of the tape and let gravity take over. Being overly cautious, I waited 48 hours before sanding off the drips. Carefully with the variable speed orbital sander and 60 plus 220 grit sandpapers, I cleaned up the bottom edges of each piece, and now I was ready to assemble the desk.